Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. My name is Amanda Haverland. I work for the Oaks and Prairies joint venture and American Bird Conservancy, and I'm going to be talking about an international assessment of state level and province level grassland conservation programs. We also call this the gap analysis. So a little bit of background info. In 2016, the Grassland Work Group was formed by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies Bird Conservation Committee. And this work group came up with the idea to conduct state by state, province by province gap analysis to map the tri-national grassland habitat programs that not only support bird conservation efforts, but all grassland species conservation efforts across North America. And so the goal of this gap analysis is to kind of see where we're at by developing a snapshot of current programs that are collectively addressing grassland management and restoration and declines in the broad suite of grassland species. So this work will hopefully help to determine where collaboration efforts and funding are needed. So to get things started, the work group put together a 10-question survey to gather information about targeted state, national, federal, or NGO programs that address grassland habitats, primarily on private lands, but we also asked for info on any other efforts addressing other grassland associated species, for instance, monarchs, pollinators, and birds. And the survey questions are geared towards collecting information about grassland conservation programs. So there were questions asking about program types, what conservation targets they have, funding sources, and partners. So the survey is web-based and was sent out via an email link to the would-be participants. So at the end of the survey, there is a request for participants to click a link that takes them to this online interactive map that you see here and draw polygons around the program locations or focal areas. And I will get back to this map in just a little bit. So to get started with this project, we had to find the right people to reach out to, and I was basically starting from scratch. We wanted to target folks from state and province wildlife agencies, as well as farm bill coordinators and folks at federal agencies and NGOs. And so I ended up spending a lot of time Googling on behalf of the working group members. And then somewhat of a side note here, I found that most of the state wildlife agency sites in the Mississippi Flyway did have web pages dedicated to landowner programs. However, finding those pages wasn't always easy, especially by way of the navigation menus on each website. And sometimes finding a contact person was even more difficult because they weren't always listed on these pages. So I think just the take home here is that state agencies may want to check to make sure these pages are easy to find. However, I do understand it's likely that the information challenges that I observed are out of the control of the managers to change due to website policies or procedures. So over the course of a couple of months, I sent out 240 emails to over 90 entities, inviting them to take the survey and to contribute spatial data. All 14 state agencies in the Mississippi Flyway responded, as well as contacts from 2 Canadian provinces. And there was a pretty good response from the Central Flyway as well. And response rates for the Atlantic and Pacific Flyways are a bit low, but I still need to follow up and nudge those folks to fill in some of the blanks. We haven't sent the survey to contacts in Mexico yet, but that is currently in the works. So here are some results from specific survey questions, and this is just for the Mississippi Flyway. So the majority of grassland conservation programs are state/provincial, followed by public-private partnerships, and then federal, state, NGO partnerships. And then for close to half the programs, birds are listed as the main conservation target. And then habitat has the second highest proportion, followed by pollinators. And I think the take home here is that the majority of the grassland conservation programs are really better classified as wildlife programs. And the majority of programs do have some sort of habitat or wildlife monitoring in place, mostly habitat and population monitoring. But about 20% of the programs either did not have any monitoring associated with the conservation practices or the survey participant didn't know if there was. Top funding sources are split equally between state/province funding and Farm Bill funding. And then in third place is federal funding, which also includes funding from the Pittman-Robertson Act. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, the other part of the gap analysis is an interactive online map to which we ask participants to contribute spatial data. And so far, 200 programs and conservation areas have been entered into the map, with 109 of those in the Mississippi Flyway. So yes, there are a lot more on the Mississippi Flyway compared to the other flyways, but there are 4 more states in this region, meaning more opportunities for state programs, plus 3 of the states here entered a number of grassland conservation areas. So let's check out the map a little bit closer online. I'm going to switch real quick. I think I'm still, I just need to exit out of my presentation. Go here. Okay. So here is the online map that we had participants go and enter spatial data. So it's really simple the way it works. I can turn layers on and off. So here's the flyways. Turn those off for a second. And here are all the different polygons that were entered. So how it works is basically all you have to do is click the edit button, zoom into the area that you're interested in. Let's say we want to put something in Arkansas. And then you select the target species here on the right side. We'll say prairie grouse. And then you start drawing a polygon. Double click to finish. And then you enter the information about your organization and the project. Simple as that. So back to this. So the map gives us a quick snapshot in time, or really an idea of what we're doing in terms of grassland conservation, private lands programs. So one question is, are we getting it done? So you can see how everyone is doing it a little bit differently and on different scales. And so do these priority geographies of the existing grassland programs match the scope and scale of what is needed to most effectively recover species of greatest conservation need? And does it make sense to try to conserve a species on a state level? So looking at it from a larger lens of the flyway level view, there may be a mismatch for some species that we'll want to address. And we might also want to be sure we're focusing on species where they occur and putting programs where they need to go in order to conserve a species and really get the biggest bang for our buck. So this table here shows our draft analysis of whether or not the State Wildlife Action Plan for each state contains the elements that are listed across the top here, but specific to grasslands. So every state lists grasslands as a habitat of concern, but only half the states delineate the grassland species from the full list of species of greatest conservation need. So in order to focus more clearly on grassland species, an important step could be listing the grassland species separately. Another possible mismatch is seen when comparing the State Wildlife Action Plans, or the SWAPs, to the Partners in Flight population analysis, which is based on range-wide breeding bird survey data. So here you can see the Partners in Flight estimated percentage of the global population of these grassland bird species in a given state, and the state name is removed here, versus if the species is on the SWAP list of species of greatest conservation need, which is indicated by the X. And so the present global population can be seen as sort of as a measure of the state's responsibility for each species. So some states in the Mississippi Flyway, the species on the SWAP list are not in line with the Partners in Flight estimates. And there are 2 possible concerns here. One being the many grassland bird species with high state percentages are not included on the list. And then the other concern is that species that are very rare in the state are included on the list, meaning that they're probably not going to get much done for that species. So it really would be best to focus on what states have enough of in order to make a difference. So this is just the beginning, and the map is really still a work in progress, and we want to build off of it and talk about how we can make it better. And so the idea is to help build a list of possible ideas to transplant and maybe start to link some of these grassland conservation delivery programs that are usually designed within each state or province. And so I also encourage anyone listening that thinks that they may have data to contribute to this effort to get in touch with me. My contact info is right here and should be on the website as well, along with a link to the map. And that's all I have, so thank you.